that would explain why big companies sort of have these product roadmaps and where small companies, or at least ours, tend to not do it. But having that ability in a sales call to be able to kind of, it's basically a magic trick, like it's unbelievable to be able to go in and be like, oh, you want to remember that thing we talked about yesterday? Hey, can you hop on a really quick call? 10-minute call, boom, show them the thing, won the deal. It's over. Product roadmaps should be the steps to realizing a strategic vision for product innovation over the coming 18 to 24 months. But too often, they become anything but. They're often just a list of features to be built into the product, and the product planning meetings associated with the roadmaps are just exercises of pushing back timelines of existing priorities and a means to dismiss newer ideas because we just don't have the time. For episode 2 of our Innovation Station series, we're throwing the roadmap out the window. Hello, sports fans. Startup Different. Dave, Chris. Startups, business, innovation. Actually, it's episode 2 of our Innovation Station series today. And we're talking about product roadmaps and their potholes. It's interesting because when I think about roadmaps, nobody uses literally a roadmap anymore. We all just use Google Navigate or whatever comes with the car.
But wouldn't you still call the map in Google Maps I
don't know.
A roadmap?
Do you? We just say navigate there. I gotta go somewhere, navigate there. Actually,
Maybe.
Friends of mine have a doormat at their house that says you have arrived at your destination. And I'm like, that's really good.
That's a good one.
Because it's 99% of the time. That's what I'm doing. Anyway, I digress. Welcome, folks. So we're talking about product roadmaps today and how much Chris Singleton absolutely loves them. They're his favorite thing. He thinks about them all the time.
As you all know, sarcasm is David's expertise. He loves to. No, I hate product roadmaps. I don't know. We've tried doing this. We've had times in our business where we built out these massive product roadmaps with all these lofty goals, and what a waste of time. So from my perspective, I'm highly opinionated on this. Dave is going to try and keep me honest and call me out on stuff that may be a little too over
I'm
the
predicting
top.
Abe Simpson, old man yells at cloud kind of level rage here today. So we'll see.
There may be some yelling at clouds. Yes, but we'll give it a shot. I kind of wanted to give a bit of a background story about why I don't like product roadmaps. And actually, it was after we were acquired by Rave Mobile Safety, our AppArmor product, we had a desktop notification feature that was built into it that was pretty good.
Let me just for the folks who don't, because that's a pretty obscure thing.
Okay.
What it is during an emergency at a place, so at a university, college, healthcare, whatever, sometimes there's these people called emergency managers, and they press a big button. And one of the things that can happen is while you're working on your corporate PC or Mac, the screen is taken over and has this big message that says get out of the building or whatever
Fire,
it is.
Whatever.
Fire,
yeah.
Whatever. And the idea is it's part of a mass notification system. Sorry, I just really wanted to make sure we're on that page.
So when we were acquired, we had built our own desktop notifications feature. Rave had some, but kind of liked what we were doing. So, of course, their sales reps don't have any idea of how to use it or demo it at that point. So I jumped on a call with a sales rep to actually do a demo, which is really bad news. You really don't want me on demos, right, Dave?
Yeah, you give away the farm. We've been over this. That was Chris, the first 3 episodes of this season.
Yeah. Chris is way too detailed on demos. But anyways, so we do the demo, we show how it works, all that sort of stuff. And actually, during the Q&A, the client actually came up with a really good idea. And that was one of the big things you want to do is you only want to send emergency alerts to people that they're intended for, obviously, right? So you only want people in the building that's got the fire alarm going off to get the desktop notification that mentions the fire. Other buildings are unaffected. So there's this concept of grouping the devices. And what the client actually said was that they had a lot of the data to group the devices in the registry on the computers. And he wondered if we could just, with our app, read a particular key out of the registry and use that data to create groups dynamically, which was a great idea. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I never thought of that. It's a great idea. We should definitely do this. So afterwards, this was like a morning demo. I, was like, I'm going to see if I can do that because this is a great idea. So I hopped into the code and made the change to the desktop client, made some changes on the back end. We did everything really agile, so we could really rapidly push out little feature changes like that. So we went through QA and all that sort of stuff. Everything passed, it was good. So we put it into production. And I emailed the sales rep the next day and said, hey, that thing they asked for? Yeah, it was a really good idea. I put it into the software, so maybe you could let them know. And the sales rep was completely blown away. Like, this was unbelievable, because he was like, but don't you have to go to the product advisory board and get it on the roadmap and then plan it out? And I'm like, well, we don't really do product roadmaps on our side. So
not anymore. I mean, like, we did at one point, but I think we kind of,
yeah, but we try not to think too far. Like, we have a vision for it, but we try not to think too far down the road, because, like, if we did have a product road mapping process in place, and that idea came up, we'd have to put that either at the end of the roadmap, so probably like 2 years down the road, or we'd have to like take something off or delay everything to insert it sooner. But either way, it was going to take a long time, and it wasn't complicated, and it was a really quick win, and it closed the deal, and like lots of other customers were going to be able to use it and all that sort of stuff. So I had this like bias that I don't want to have a roadmap kind of hanging over my head, because I find like I don't know, it's soul crushing. It's so exciting for a developer to have an idea and be able to implement it quickly and put it in front of a customer. And actually, that kind of ties into what we do with the MVP process, but in a much more smaller scale. So that's my story on this. Yeah.
And like, don't get me wrong, I like agile development. I like getting things out there quickly. We love delighting customers for obvious reasons. It's an essential part of any company's, particularly any startups, like, raison d'etre. You better be able to do that. The only thing that makes me hesitate here, well, there's a couple things that make me hesitate, but the first thing that makes me hesitate is, how did you like adequately know that was like well enough tested? When I think about software breaks, okay, even, and I wondered, if you're spinning something out that fast, like, I kind of think of the product roadmap, and I'm maybe I'll play a little devil's advocate here for a second, but I think of the product roadmap as something that like structures the idea of like the priorities of the company, and that also enforces a certain level of Q&A, because there's like a time allocation built in to each item.
Yeah, like, look, like maybe that was a bit too quick, okay? But at the
did it
same
break?
time,
Did it break when you deployed it?
Like, it didn't break. And here's why, because I know the product really well. I built big chunks of it, so I knew it like the back of my hand. And it wasn't like a completely novel idea. We were already reading other properties off the devices to group the devices. So really, it was like we had a chunk of code that I copied and pasted. I made a slight change to make it look somewhere else. Okay. But then the data got sent into our normal grouping, algorithm, and data storage, all that sort of stuff. So there wasn't anything monumental happening there. And then after that, like the actual, like the server side of it, there wasn't really any other changes, because it was just like another group that they would pick from. So, so like, I don't know. I
guess it was like just we're getting in the weeds a little bit there, but like basically it was like low risk, I guess.
Yeah. I was not concerned that it was going to be something that was going to potentially break or was likely to break. And, I always use this analogy of, fail positively. So when you think of technology, when it breaks,
escalators,
what happens? Man. Yeah. My favorite analogy is the escalator. When you're at the shopping mall and the escalator isn't moving, it turns into stairs. Right. Yeah, so it fails positively. So with that, it would have failed positively. The dynamic groups that we were reading off the device just wouldn't have shown up. Right.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have affected.
So like worst case, they could have broadcast like an alert to everyone. Right. If it broke, but if it didn't break, they would have been able to target it as desired.
I think the way it would have broken would have been those dynamic groups just never showed up to begin with.
Yeah.
So like we would have known it. right before we even launched, right? Like before we even implemented it with the client.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have been something that would have been catastrophic by any means. So it was like a low risk minor change that we were able to do really quick. We closed the deal, and the customer was thrilled. The sales rep was thrilled. Like all was good.
Coming back to your side of the Abraham Simpson side of the argument here.
Yeah.
I will tell you that salespeople generally despise product roadmaps. And the reason for that is sort of as you described. You don't have that opportunity to delight. One of your biggest advantages as a more nimble, smaller, however you want to qualify it, software company, especially versus the really big fellas, is that you can go into a deal and do something to your software to wow the customer and win that deal in a very short amount of time. And I don't know if this is just like an evolutionary thing as a company gets bigger, that this is one of the things they do. That would explain why big companies sort of have these product roadmaps and where small companies, or at least ours, tend to not do it. But having that ability in a sales call to be able to kind of, it's basically a magic trick.
Yeah.
Like it's unbelievable.
I know. Yeah.
To be able to go in and be like, oh, remember that thing we talked about yesterday? Hey, can you hop on a really quick call? 10-minute call, boom, show them the thing, won the deal.
Yeah.
It's over.
So that was the thing when we were just us, when we pre-acquisition, we would do that all the time because we could close deals. Like we could do, and customers would be blown away. I
should point out, we had to be careful. Like we wanted to make sure they were, paying a little bit more money because we were doing that, and they were well qualified lead, and like all these other things. Like the development team, for what it's worth, didn't get to see all of those kind of silly feature requests, just the good ones. If that sort of adds up. So
you guys were curating the feature requests.
Sure.
Compliance. Yeah.
I mean, some salespeople will be like, this is a great feature.
So here's the thing. Now, I don't want to act like this was Chris's great idea, that you don't really need a product roadmap. This is not really my great idea. I actually learned it from somebody who I'm highly aligned with on a lot of their thoughts on technology, software development, all these types of things. So some of you out there may know David Heinemeier Hansen, who's a pretty interesting person, written a lot of books, you just go through some of the
Rework doesn't have to be crazy at work.
Rework, Getting Real. It doesn't have to be crazy at work.
Yeah. And they're the Basecamp. Is he one of the Basecamp guys?
Yeah, Basecamp is like a project management software application, and the company that makes it is called 37 Signals. And so he works for 37 Signals. They do other products. They do an email client called Hey, and he was actually the person that built the Ruby on Rails web framework.
Wow.
So he blogs, he writes books, and I read his stuff, and I just gobble it up because I've lived it. And I think the way that he thinks is very much the way I think. And
you
I
guys
think
would be bros.
Developers. Yeah, I'd love to hang out with them.
Not literal bros. That's us. Figurative bros.
Why can't you think more like the other David?
I'm pretty far. Well, I mean, I think we align on a lot of stuff, but I'm not sure I'm technically savvy enough to do that. So.
Yeah. So, anyways, he has a really good quote that I'd love to read out. Sure. He's kind of like, the notion. So, when you're thinking about roadmaps, he's like, the notion that 6 months ago you knew what 18 months from now would look like that quote is priceless, right? Like, I don't know about when we were running our business, it was changing all the time. We had a vision. We kind of knew where we were going. It was going to be public safety related. It's going to be things that's, applicable to our clients and stuff like that. I didn't have to really articulate that super hard. That was just easy to remember. But having a roadmap where I'm going to try and pick what I'm doing 2 years down the road.
Yeah.
Just, I don't think I would have ever been right.
It's absurd, especially in software. I feel like 3 months sometimes is a reach,
Yeah. I remember we hired one of our, I think our third developer, Austin. Shout out to Austin.
Shout out to Austin.
Remember Austin, after he started, he was working for us for about 3 months, and he kind of comes to me and goes, where's the roadmap? What are you guys doing? And I'm like, well, we don't have one.
Whatever I want, Austin. Back off.
Yeah. And he's like, well, shouldn't you have a roadmap? And I'm like, I don't really want a roadmap. I kind of just want to see where it goes and see what comes up and kind of build. And we have a vision. We know we're doing public safety. We're not doing apps. We're not doing whatever. But why do we need that? And he was kind of like, well, you just should. You should just have one. And I'm like, No.
Well, I mean,
So,
we
yeah.
had a product backlog. Okay. And the
Yeah.
backlog was like a list of things we ought to do, but they weren't like time based. It wasn't like on a specific like rail, like this is when it
Yeah.
has to happen kind of
Right.
idea, you
That's
know?
a whole nother cloud I'm going to scream at another episode. Okay.
Ooh,
Like the whole product backlog thing. We
fun.
actually went through our backlog. I don't even know if you know this, but our backlog at one point had like 6,000
Sweet.
PBIs on it,
Well,
6,000
because
like little ideas, you know?
if you give the team, I know some folks that work at or worked at Shopify, and if they had access to like Jira and they could make PBIs and toss them
Yeah.
up. And
Yeah.
I feel like if you're, and, some of them were like bug reports, which is one thing,
Mhm.
but when it comes to like product enhancements, everybody's got an idea and nobody
Yeah.
knows really how it works. So it's a
Yeah.
kind of a challenge that doesn't shock me that much. And we
So
were a
our,
relatively small team. We had that. That's
yeah,
pretty
like we
cool.
had like 16 people and ended up, we did the same thing. We opened it up so anybody could add a PBI and we ended up with like 6,000 in like no time. So like, okay. So then I remember, maybe about the same year that we were being acquired, I was like, geez, I don't want to like walk into due diligence on an acquisition and show this like product backlog like mess. So I remember we went through it. Our development team went through it. We kind of just put things into buckets, like duplicates that we can delete, things that we've already done, like things that don't make any sense anymore and stuff like that. Anyways, we got it down from 6,000 to like 800 after
Oh,
it
nice.
was like a week of going through product
Sure.
backlog refinement, which
Yeah.
was awful, but we hadn't been doing a good job of doing it on an ongoing
Well, I guess that kind
basis.
of reiterates your point, though. Like you really don't. I mean, there's some duplicates in there and stuff too, but you also
Yep.
your priority shift,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So that's kind of the point. So let's go think back now to the product roadmap, okay? And that's the other thing that I really struggled with a product roadmap. It was like blinders, right? It was like, no, we have to do the roadmap. We have to do the roadmap. And think about all the thousands of PBIs that we took off our product backlog.
Yeah, I just
That
did the
were
math on that. It was
yeah,
375 PBIs per employee that were
yeah,
submitted.
yeah. So, but those, like, if we had just like forced ourselves to do all those, what a waste of time. And like a lot of it didn't make sense. They were,
Mhm.
they were already done or they didn't make any sense anymore for the market. So like, I really struggle with like product roadmap, like, and I know it's being refined, they're reviewing it and that sort of stuff, but it's just like a set of blinders. And it becomes this thing where you're always saying no to everything. We can't do that because this other thing's on the product roadmap. So that little
that we put on
adjustment.
the roadmap 2 years ago is going
Yeah.
to take
Yeah.
priority over the thing that a competitor just introduced a new feature and we're hemorrhaging against them and we need to do something. Cool, we'll get to it in 2 effing years.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
It's like, I don't know, I'm going to coin a term here. It's like product petrification, where like you literally just are stuck. Your product is static at that point because you're working on some stupid thing that doesn't
Patent
actually
pending.
matter anymore. Yeah. So, anyways, the other thing I want to just talk about, like the soul crushing nature of roadmaps as a developer, like, the longer things go stale, ideas go stale. Okay. And they sit on that roadmap and nobody wants to build a stale feature, a thing that, is
Yeah.
just sat there forever and is no longer exciting. What developers love doing is coming up with an idea in the morning, building it that afternoon and showing it to the customer the next morning, like that rapid iteration. So I think the roadmaps kind of reinforce this like staleness of ideas, whereas there's something to be said about fresh ideas.
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts on this one. I would suggest that the staleness is also not just felt by the developers, because what's going to happen too is a lot of the suggestions, you're going to get product enhancement, as we've alluded to, you're going to get product enhancement requests from your customers almost constantly. And it doesn't
Right.
matter really what you do. You get feedback like in any kind of like physical product all the way to software to whatever, you're going to get feedback constantly. And people expect a certain level of actionability. Like, I think you could maybe get away with 3 to 6 months in some cases if somebody gives you, so from them sending you an email or to filling in a feedback thing or an enhancement or whatever, a survey, to that 6 month period, you can maybe get away with, hey, we're going to do the thing. And I think they would just barely be like, okay, they're less excited as time goes on. And so I
Right.
feel like what'll happen is, especially with your more engaged customers, the customers that really believe in you, they're just going to stop. They're just going to stop
Yeah.
giving you ideas. because you don't engage with them. There's no point for them to do that. And they'll realize that eventually. This causes obviously some other problems. I would suggest, like, from a retention perspective, you're less sticky. From a product perspective, you're less agile, you're less interesting, you're less on market. There's a whole series of problems with this.
Yeah, exactly. And,
sorry, go ahead, man.
So I was just going to say, like, I don't want to suggest that you shouldn't have like that vision for your product, but what maybe like the sweet spot, I think you just said 3 to 6 months. I think that's even too far. I think it might
actually be too far.
I wouldn't, we used to,
I'm just trying to be realistic though.
Yeah.
We got a lot of priorities too.
We changed like our sprint lengths, a couple of times, but we kind of landed on 3 weeks was working out well as like a sprint.
And just for the folks at home, a sprint is like how often you publish new code to like
well,
big, no, it's actually more complicated than that.
It's more complicated. It's like your planning session. So what are we going to build and what are we going to plan out? So we would go in 3 week sprints where we'd plan out what people are going to do over the next 3 weeks. So it was kind of like setting up your work for the next 3 weeks. And we would maybe be thinking like maybe 2 sprints, like the current sprint and the next one. Okay. But that's about it. So it was like a 6 week kind of window, and definitely lots of flexibility in the, weeks 4, 5, and 6 that we were thinking ahead to. Like, we weren't really committed to that stuff. We could change that without too much turbulence. Yeah.
Let me tell you one other thing that ability to be flexible with what your priorities are during that time, I think is hugely important too, because what also happens is the product roadmap is more or less sacred to the people who are managing it. It is the single timeline. If you're a Marvel fan, it's like, I can't remember what it's actually called, but it's like, the original timeline or whatever. And it really, they don't want to change it, but there are circumstances in which it gets changed and it's not fun. It's usually something rolling downhill. So executive team says, new thing, we have this big priority. And here's where this gets really weird is they're definitely going to modify the product roadmap, or they're going to try to stretch resources so they still do what they're supposed to, but do more, which they're not going to like either. And the developers, by the way, also don't like that. And it's also very frustrating if you are either a customer or the salesperson waiting on something potentially for 2 years. And then something just comes in and just blows it up, and they're pushing it out another 6 months.
Yeah. So actually, there's a couple of myths here that I want to blow up. Okay. So I think the first one, and you probably got the
point. Not just bust them, just gone.
Like people like Austin was like, a product roadmap is like necessary to guide your development process. So I'm going to blow that up. I'm going to say, like, I just plan out a few weeks at a time, whatever makes sense for you, and reassess your direction frequently rather than thinking, what's going to happen, 6, 12, 18, 24 months out. It's just too far. The other thing too is that a lot of people think, well, our customers want us to publish a product roadmap of the things we're working on so that they can know what's coming down the pipes. Yeah, it's totally old school. It's a very poor approach because you're not going to hit the timelines you're going to tell your customers. You're not even maybe going to hit the sequence of when those things come out. Mm-hmm. So
you're setting them up for disappointment.
Yeah. So the other David, DHH, he's got a really good blog post that he put out recently. And it's don't promise, just ship. So don't bother promising stuff to your clients. Just surprise them by shipping the stuff when it's ready.
I agree.
And get a lot of pressure off your back, of them constantly be looking for more things from you. So yeah, absolutely. So that's the 2 big myths that I would bust is you don't need a product roadmap, and your customers don't really need one either. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember even in some like RFP responses, they would ask for, please provide your product roadmap for whatever period. And would, for a while, I'd be like, well, we have this long winded explanation of whatever. And then after a while, I was like, we don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Like, it's the way it is. Yeah. I'm not going to give you that visibility, not because we aren't innovating, but I'm not going to be beholden to something that, like, again, a decision I made while writing that RFP, which is, probably going to be 3 to 6 months out from when an actual decision is made.
Yeah. You know what? I would just put, that's not best practice, and then link to one of DHH's.
Oh, I'm sure they would love that. I'm sure the evaluators would be like, oh, I am stupid.
Yeah. the tech guy who like wrote the thing, who asked for the product roadmap, just gets like burned. Okay, that one's going to the garbage.
Yeah. I don't, gotta. Yeah. We wanted to put cookies in those boxes we would send for RP responses, but we were worried that would be bribery. But anyway,
Cool.
yeah. So this is really interesting. What I would be interested in is the take on. Do you think just because we got a couple minutes, do you think we could have continued to grow the company? Let's say you had 25 developers, okay, or more. Do you think you could have done it without a product roadmap?
Oh, tough question.
Right? Like there's a quality control level here. It's I think most companies are trying to like walk along on this tightrope that is, on the one hand, kind of being agile and meeting market needs and getting there as quickly as possible, to, on the other hand, making sure that there's a certain level of quality in what's published. You know?
I see where you're coming from, and I think things get exponentially more complicated as your team size grows. And I can see why there might be a bias towards doing things like that. How do you get everybody on
bureaucracy?
Board?
It's just natural. Yeah, I love one of my favorite quotes. The bureaucracy is expanding to meet the needs of the expanding bureaucracy. You know, like it just seems to just come out of nowhere, where you're just like, we need more structure, which sort of implies oversight.
Yeah, I was reading an article in HBR, and the title of it was "Step 1: Fire all the managers." We're gonna have to actually read that and dive into that episode, because I kind of love just the premise of it. But there's definitely like an issue,
like the middle managers
company.
Yeah,
like it was arguing. I don't know. I didn't read the whole article, so I'll have to circle back on that. But I understand your point. I would fight it off as long as you could. I would just stay as small and agile as you can. And maybe what that means is you take your product, when I think of our product, App Armor, we had like the mobile app piece, we had like the mass notification piece, we had like the SMS piece, we had the desktop notification piece, we had like all these different components of it. And I wonder if what you do is you just sort of break those into individual things, and you say, okay, within those little spheres of ownership or of product, let that team innovate quickly in its space, but maybe like don't bring everybody together, so that it's tough for everybody to understand every single feature and every single product that your company is building. So if they can be sort of like specialists as your company gets bigger, then maybe that's the best way. I don't know. We'll have to find some data on this.
Yeah, for sure. One last thing on this is, I think that DHH and those like 37 Signal guys, I'm pretty sure they're a really small team as well. Something like, I want to say 20 to 40 people. At one point they were anyway. And
I think they're hundreds of developers.
They're hundreds now.
Actually. Yeah. Okay, like they're bigger now.
Wrong.
But, don't get me wrong. Like I think we all have, I think we all have challenges, but I think that just having that mindset of staving that off, the roadmap idea off for as long as you can, and do it in a much shorter, time frame, that you'll be better.
I just remember that in rework, they were arguing a lot for like remote working before it was cool. And one of the things they said is they had a small team, but they could do it from everywhere, and they were very efficient. So,
that's remote. That's a different book. Yeah. Sorry. Rework is actually on this sort of stuff, but
you are locked in on this guy. Wow.
I know.
Let's get him on the show.
I think I've got like the physical books. I've got the ebooks. I've got the audiobooks of these books, because I do like a lot of their thinking, and it actually, Dave, it served us really well, because a lot of the things we implemented were, came from some of those books, a lot of those ideas.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I think we're out of time here, so let's just do a quick summary. Folks, we're not big fans of roadmaps, particularly not Chris. Instead, just planning things out a few weeks at a time. Focus on what you can build and ship today, but you should still have a vision for your product as well at a high level. It's about flexibility, and it's about meeting market needs and delighting your customers. And honestly, our experience with the roadmap is it doesn't always get you to that place. So something to consider. Thanks so much for joining us. Next week, we'll have another episode, our third episode of the Innovation Station series, where we'll be talking about how to innovate to create a new market. So that should be a lot of fun. Please rate the pod, say hi to us on social, and we will see you next week. Thanks for joining us. If you like what you heard, subscribe to and rate Startup Different in your favorite podcast app. If you want to see our radio faces, Check us out on YouTube at Startup Different and look us up on social. We're probably there if you are. And lastly, do you want to feature your startup on the show? Reach out via our website, startupdifferent.com. See you next time.